Have you ever been in a situation where you're attending a social event, for example, your friend's wedding, or maybe a business networking event, and you find yourself alone and you don't know anyone else in this event and you wished you had someone to talk to? Well, that happened to me, and I know the feeling of feeling really lousy, not being able to talk to anyone when everyone else is talking to everyone else. So today, I want to share with you 3 tips on how to communicate better. Lesson number 1 is the choice of words. Words are sharper than the double-edged sword. As you know, in many countries, when leaders use the wrong words, it can cause wars, it can cause economic sanctions. Let's not talk about global scale. Let's talk about what happens in your workplace. If you use the wrong kind of words when you communicate to people, if there's a misunderstanding, it can cause toxicity in your workplace, and you do not want that. What you want is actually teamwork, and what you are trying to say, just trying to express your frustrations. But before you do that, if you really need to express your frustrations, maybe you can tell what you learn from that experience, and that would actually turn the situation around. Instead of looking like you are a victim and looking like you're complaining, instead tell people what you have learned from that experience. It will turn the situation to be a positive experience. At the same time, when you talk, instead of using something negative, instead of saying what did not work for you, tell something about what worked for you. Instead of talking about what pains you, tell them about something that helped you in your workplace. Tell something about what inspires you to go to work every day, and tell about what makes you happy going to work, what makes you happy when you work with other people, when you interact with people, and people will respond in a positive way. When you complain, people will also share their complaints. So you don't want that at the end of the day, you have a conversations that is all about complaints and it gets everybody nowhere. So by talking positively, you will find that the outcome of discussing positively, everyone learns from that discussion, and it moves the conversation into a positive light. Remember, you want to reframe yourself as a leader, not as someone who is a victim of the situation. Lesson number 2 is rapport. Rapport is a very powerful tool. There's this technique in NLP called mirroring and matching, developed by Milton Erickson. It is about trying to copy the other person's body language. For example, if a person, the person that you talk to, maybe he's, putting his hand on his ear, what you do is to reflect the same by putting your hand maybe on your cheek, just to reflect the action that he's doing on his side. Because subconsciously, the human mind perceives that if the person is similar to you, you tend to be able to communicate better with the other person. Generally, people like people who are similar to them, and people tend to stay away from people who are not, in the same wavelength with them. So by this technique, you find that it is easier to rapport with the person. For example, if he crosses his legs, and so you do the same, but maybe in a subtle way. So avoid doing an exact copy, because if that person finds out you're doing a deliberate copy, then it will be very unnatural, and the response of this technique, the effect of this technique will not be very efficient anymore. So do it subtly without the other person knowing about it. Lesson number 3 is to listen intently. So it is very natural that you want to tell your side of the story whenever you start a conversation. But before you do that, remember, in order to tell someone there's somebody that needs to listen. So to communicate better, it's good to be a good listener. It requires a lot of patience, and it requires you to really listen actively. Active listening doesn't just involve just listening with your ears, but try to understand what the other person is trying to tell you and try to feel what they are feeling inside. Because when you do that, you will be able to respond based on what they have said, and they would know that you're listening to them. So after what they have said, what you can do is to ask questions and maybe paraphrase what they have just said, so that they know that you are actually listening and you're trying to validate what they're saying. But it does not mean that you have to agree with what they say. What you have to do is say, I hear what you say, and what you're trying to say is this. And that's interesting because, and if you disagree, what you can say is, I hear what you say. At the same time, my opinion is blah 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 blah. And you can say your opinion even it differs from their opinion, but they know, at least they know that you are listening to what they have said. One more thing to know is that when you speak to people, remember to have eye contact. Don't look at your phone, because I usually see others, when they start to look at the phone, it really shows that they're disinterested to speak to you. It gives that impression that they're not into the conversation. Also, don't text as you are speaking to another person, because it's just plain rude. And when you speak to people, your body language must be reflecting that you are interested. Instead of slouching, just stand straight, don't put your hands in your pockets, and just relax and enjoy the conversation. So with all the 3 tips I shared today, it's important that you practice this at home before you go to any social event. For an introverted person like me, it scares me to go to such events without preparation. So what I do is I prepare some personal stories at home, and before I go there, I practice at home and get my stories right. When I reach there, when I speak to people, my stories will just come out naturally, and you feel at ease because you have done this conversation before, and people who listen to you don't actually know that you have actually practice it. In fact, they will say that, wow, you're such a natural speaker, and isn't it wonderful that somebody can speak to you comfortably, and you feel that it's very comfortable to speak to the other person as well. So if you really enjoyed these tips, do remember to press subscribe and press the notification bell, and give me your comments on what you have learned today. And if there's any topics that you would like to find out more, do comment in the comment button below.